With the success of How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss in terms of the original children's book and the animated TV special and also the other spin-offs starring the Grinch, there was yet another adaptation that was made back in November 17th, 2000, and it was live action. It was simply marketed as The Grinch, which was directed by Ron Howard, who also produced the film. The co-producer was Brian Grazer. The screenplay was done by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman. The music was composed by the legendary James Horner. The cinematography was handled by Donald Peterman. It was edited by Dan Hanley and Mike Hill, and it starred Jim Carrey, Taylor Momsen, Christine Baranski, Jeffrey Tambor, Bill Irwin, Molly Shannon, Kelly, Clint Howard, Mindy Sterling, Jeremy Howard, TJ Thine, Jim McSimon, Anthony Hopkins as the narrator, Bryce Dallas Howard, Josh Ryan Evans, Ben Bookbinder, and Landry Albright. Now, when I first watched this, ever since I was about 8 or 9 years old, I remembered it for being very enjoyable and for having pretty good effects at the time. And basically, it was one of those films I definitely enjoyed and one that has kind of introduced me to the world of the Grinch, even though the original one did that first. So I actually found myself comparing and contrasting which was the more superior of the Grinches or these Grinch adaptations. Was it the cartoon version or was it the live action version? Even though I always lean towards the cartoon version for its simplicity and for its memorability and just how iconic it was, at least with the 2000 film adaptation, it was quite memorable in its own special way. Sure, there were flaws, which I'll get to later, but there were some things about it that were quite memorable and quite interesting as well. Now, with the story, yes, it is your typical story of how the Grinch stole Christmas, but there were also other things added into the story, like how the Grinch's past was. Now, he didn't really have the greatest of pasts. He was raised by a couple of old ladies who really loved him and took care of him, but he was treated like an outsider when it came to the kids at school. So you could really see why he's become so misanthropic, why he's become the way he is, and why he doesn't even trust so many people that much. And of course, the relationship between the Grinch and Cindy in terms of friendship is explored a lot more. Not to mention the other characters do contribute a fair amount of time to really develop the Grinch's and even Cindy Lou's personality as a whole. So even though the story does stick to the very familiar story of how the Grinch stole Christmas, there were some things that were added into the story, like to even give a little bit of further development for the main character, and even to really give other characters to really work well off of the Grinch. The cinematography and the effects at the time were very much well done. It's really colorful, it's quite whimsical as well, and it's quite fun to watch at times as well. But mostly it has to do with a lot of the colors, and especially the makeup job done for Jim Carrey as the Grinch. The makeup and everything from the costume department, from the production department, was actually well done, and it actually gives off this very whimsical, very magical environment, and it's still pretty well done. Now, in terms of the music, I have to say that when it comes to great music, you can't go wrong with a gentleman like James Horner. He's totally up there with the likes of Danny Elfman, so he really does compose a lot of great stuff. What's also quite interesting with the You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch song is that it's not just a basso voice singing this song. But a huge mixture of other singers, other styles to really make this song come out interesting, even though at times it does come out a little bit jarring, but basically it's just using whatever creative measures they could really come up with in terms of this adaptation, otherwise they'd be playing it too safe. So the music really does a very great job all throughout. And then we get the characters. Now, in the original, the Grinch was very well known for being quite menacing and pretty much of a grouch. In this one, even though he does maintain that grouchiness, there are times in which he can pretty much mug the screen and act really over the top. But at least he's still quite likable and a lot of fun. And we also get to feel kind of sorry for him because of how he grew up as an outsider. His backstory was rather interesting, and then we also get the likes of Cindy Lou Who. Now, in the original, she didn't really get a hell load of screen time, and she was just basically the nice little girl. Here, she has a lot more personality than I could ever give her credit for. She's not just your typical little girl, but she's proved to be very smart, quite curious, quite rambunctious as well, but quite well-meaning as a character. So her character is a lot more fleshed out than the original 1966 version or even the original children's book. And then you have the likes of the mayor, who really has the tendency to be very bombastic and kind of a jerk at times, and his love interest, Martha May, who grew up to be, well, pretty much someone who loves all the fine things in life and someone who is very much someone who, well, is pretty much like kind of vain but very well-meaning. But she's still a joy to watch as well. Not to mention her chemistry with the mayor was totally well done. And with Max the dog, he still maintains that likability and that charm. And we even get a lot of other characters, like even Cindy Lou's parents and even Cindy Lou's older brothers. They do add something to the screen from time to time. And not to mention, it's basically her older brothers who ended up encountering the Grinch first, albeit they ended up being scared away by one of the Grinch's contraptions. So, in essence, the characters have their likabilities and even their moments where they really do stand out in terms of just how likable they can be and just how fun they can be watched every time. And as far as I'm concerned with the acting, it's actually quite good. Jim Carrey does a pretty good job with the Grinch, but there are times in which he goes really over the top and he kind of mugs the screen from time to time, but it's quite forgivable because he manages to pour in a lot of fun in this character, and I could really tell that this gentleman was really having a ball. With Taylor Momsen as Cindy Lou Who years before she ended up on Gossip Girl, she gives a very lovable and multifaceted portrayal of this innocent child character. Jeffrey Tambor really does play his asshole character well, and with Christine Baranski, she's definitely a joy to watch on screen. And especially with the likes of Bill Irwin and Molly Shannon as the Who parents, I felt they really did their roles very well, especially the likes of Kelly, who played Max the dog. I felt like he was very enjoyable on screen. And then we even get the likes of Josh Ryan Evans, Ben Bookbinder, and Landry Albright as the younger versions of the Grinch, the Mayor, and Martha May respectively. They do pretty good jobs with their roles, and I could really tell that each and every actor was basically enjoying his or herself, and I really could see that they were basically having a ball, especially Anthony Hopkins as the narrator. There's no doubt that I actually like the original narrator, Boris Karloff, but with Anthony Hopkins, I could really tell that he enjoyed being the narrator for this adaptation of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. With his resonant voice and his regal presence, you could really tell that this guy really knew what he was doing. So overall, I have to say that this adaptation, which is live action of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, was kind of interesting. And even though I'm kind of torn between if it's any good or not, I actually have to say it's okay, really. It's enjoyable from time to time, and it's a rather interesting foray to see this go into live action. So with that said, I give this a 3 out of 5. It's okay, really. It's enjoyable from time to time. Not to mention, what really makes the film stand out is definitely the genuine character interactions and also Jim Carrey's bombastic performance, even though he can be kind of hammy. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to stay tuned for a lot more Christmas reviews and a lot more look backs on holiday specials and even some album reviews that I might even look back on. So until then, see you later, everybody, and I hope you're all having a Merry Christmas so far.